In Japan, they have a beautiful philosophy called kintsugi, mending broken ceramics with gold to make them more beautiful than before. But here, in this piece of French colonial faience from 18th century Illinois, we see a very different story. No gold, no philosophy of beautiful imperfection, just desperate, practical mending that tells us everything about survival on the colonial frontier. This isn't about making something beautiful. This is about making something last when the nearest replacement is 4,000 miles and 6 months away. Imagine you're Marie Chartier, living in the village of Kaskaskia in 1750. Your husband is a trader, your family relatively prosperous by frontier standards. This teapot, this specific piece of delicate French faience, represents more than just a way to serve tea. It represents connection to home, to civilization, to a world of refinement that feels impossibly far away when you're surrounded by endless prairie and the constant work of survival. Every piece of fine ceramics in the Illinois country arrived in the same way, shipped from the pottery centers of Rouen or Nevers to the port of La Rochelle, loaded onto vessels bound for New Orleans, then transferred to pirogues and pushed upriver against the current of the Mississippi, through hostile territory, past snags and sandbars, and the ever-present threat of loss. 6 months minimum, often longer, and costing more than a habitant farmer might make in a month. Then disaster strikes. Maybe it's knocked down from the table during a hasty meal before the men leave for a trading expedition. Maybe it's jostled during one of the frequent moves as families follow opportunities along the river. Look at this break. Clean through this spout, cracks radiating down the body. In France, in a city, this might mean a trip to the market for a replacement. Here, this means a decision that reveals everything about colonial priorities. Do you mourn it and discard it? Or do you adapt, improvise, and make it work? Mary, or more likely her husband, as this required metalworking skills, makes the choice that archaeologists are still finding in French colonial sites across the Midwest. They mend it. First, carefully drill tiny holes on either side of the major cracks. The drill bits are precious too, probably made by the local blacksmith from imported steel. Each hole must be perfectly placed to avoid creating new fractures. Then, thin iron wire, cut from whatever's available, maybe a piece of binding wire from a trade pack, is threaded through and twisted tight. These become the staples that hold the major pieces together. But wire alone won't seal the cracks, so they melted lead, easier to work than pewter, more available than silver, and pour it into the gaps. It's not pretty. It's not supposed to be. It just needs to work. The result? A teapot that might not pour quite as elegantly, that shows its scars plainly, but that can still serve tea to guests and remind its owners of home. This isn't an isolated case. Archaeologists working at Fort de Chartres at Cahokia, at sites throughout the Illinois country, find evidence of this same repair technique over and over. Plates with lead-filled cracks, bowls held together with iron staples, even chamber pots, hardly decorative items, carefully mended rather than discarded. Every piece tells the same story. In a world where replacement meant months and precious silver, repairs meant survival. Consider this. A single piece of quality faience might cost the equivalent of 40 livres in the Illinois country. A laborer made perhaps 20 livres a month. This teapot represented 2 months of wages. No wonder they couldn't bear to throw it away. The Japanese concept of kintsugi emerges from a philosophy that finds beauty in imperfection, that celebrates the history of an object's damage and repair. The golden veins become part of the object's story, making it more valuable, more beautiful than before. The French colonial approach comes from a different place entirely. There's no attempt to beautify the repair, No philosophy of enhanced value through damage. This is purely pragmatic. A broken thing made functional again because functional is what matters when you're building a civilization from scratch in the wilderness. But in its own way, isn't this just as beautiful? Isn't there something moving about this determination to preserve connection to home, to maintain the small rituals of civilization, afternoon tea properly served, even when everything around you is raw and new and uncertain? Every time Mary lifted this teapot, she felt these rough repairs under her fingers. Every pour was a reminder of loss, but also of persistence. The lead patches caught the light differently than the smooth glaze. The twisted wire created tiny ridges that hadn't been there before. But it still poured tea. It still served its purpose. And in a world where purpose often mattered more than perfection, that was enough. We sometimes imagine our ancestors as either more practical or more sentimental than ourselves. But looking to this teapot, we see they were both. Practical enough to mend rather than mourn, sentimental enough to rethink the mending was worthwhile. In the end, this teapot survived, not because it was repaired beautifully, but because it was repaired at all. Because someone, 275 years ago, decided that broken didn't mean worthless. It just meant different. And that decision, repeated in hundreds of French colonial homes, left us this remarkable record of resilience, adaptation, and the very human refusal to let go of the things that connect us to who we are, even when everything else is changing. What stories do your broken things tell? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching.